And here we are, a Monday version of Dualistic Unity Raw. Not that the days mean anything whatsoever, so much as it's a convenient way to keep track of how close I am to landing in Colorado later this week. I am fucking stoked about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And it's just because I get to meet a bunch of new people. There are several new people who have never been to a retreat coming to the retreats, and there are several people who are returning from previous retreats. And I am so jazzed to meet all of these people, including Jazz. Because of course there is a person named Jazz who joins us at our retreats and in our Discord and in our groups and whatnot. And most of you already know Jazz, and so I'm going to stop talking about Jazz. Hi, Jazz. Aside from that, I have a few things I want to rant about shortly, but I'm going to go and set up the YouTube thing and pass it over to Andrew, who has moved locations, not by his own will, but by the hand of God, as it were.
Exactly. And let me know. There's a siren going. I have one of my windows open, so if you hear any background noise, just let me know. But yeah, there was a leak in the apartment above mine, and so it was dripping down. And it's funny, like it's interesting, and this is just kind of hit me how people go crazy about something like that. Like there was a leak, and there was just like a puddle in the middle of the apartment, and this might be just something I don't know. I'm not going to say I should be better about this, but I see that and I'm just like, just throw a towel on it and wipe it up. And there's just no, I don't look into like, oh, that could turn into something way worse. It's like, I'm not going to be bothered by it. And it's interesting that there's people that I know who would see something like that and just be up in arms and almost take it personally if something like that happened. Like they were in apartment, there was an issue, and they would just turn it into this massive thing when it isn't a massive thing. Or any sort of situation. There's a part of Airbnb you move into and it smells like a little funny, but it's not that bad. Like they would demand to be put in another spot. I'm just like, yeah, it smells kind of funny. And that's it. Like that's the extent of it. There, you could put all of your energy and attention into that, or you could not. And there's always that option to do so. And it's interesting how people will just go berserk about the littlest things. But anyway, so yeah, so they put me in a different spot, and it's actually like a much bigger apartment. Like it's, I think twice as, they're not making me pay any different, obviously, but yeah, it's like twice as much. I saw the nightly cost. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, I'll take it. But it's like so ridiculous that I don't mind the smaller spots, because then it's like there's less, you got to move around, and there's you almost just take up the amount of space that you're given. Like you not that I'm buying new things and like fucking furnishing the place, but everything's kind of spread out. And I feel like people do that in homes too. Like when they're not required to think about what they actually need, they'll just fill the space. And so it can be, I don't know, helpful to take a step back and just think about what you actually need. And I always prefer smaller spaces, not to the point that it's like tiny, but people will get caught. And I feel like this is a big thing, and it's still a big thing. Like, oh, bigger means better. And if you have a really big space, you see how kind of absurd it is. And I guess if you have a lot of people over all the time, it can be helpful. But for the most part, like it's just, it doesn't make as much sense to have a massive space using things you don't need. And it's just funny how we use that, like having a big house or something, as like a value add to ourselves, when it's actually can potentially take away from our experience, like having so much extra things that we own, but we just do it because like more space that I own equals better me. Kind of. But when you think about it logically and like how you utilize it, it actually can take away from your experience. So we can have a trade-off of like add value, diminish experience, as opposed to fuck value and have like take advantage of the fullness of the experience. So Anyway, yeah, I'm in a new spot.
That's awesome. It's funny because our sense of value really changes when our environment becomes less comfortable, and all of a sudden something that most people would be like, yeah, so you're just like, you don't understand. This thing has helped me in so many ways. Like I used to have this camping shovel, and basically it was awesome. You can get them anywhere really, but this one was really well built. It folded right up, durable metal, that whole thing. That shovel helped me through so many different days and so many different challenges, holding things up, digging ditches, breaking branches, building shelters. Like there was just so much in that little shovel, and it did so much for my life, and it was so valuable. And yet if you went to the store, it cost you less than 40, $50. And somebody be like, wow, how valuable is that? It's like, bring it with you when you're really roughing it. You'll find out. And so it dawned on me, one of the most valuable experiences of my life was my time in the forest. Not just my time in the forest for the long period of time, but all of the time I've ever spent in the forest, roughing it, being away from I guess civilization, comfort, to any degree. Really, it doesn't matter if you're camping outside of town or you're really like hiking up a bush into like through a trail for several days, if not a week or two. Um, there there is this lesson that goes with how little you need and how much you are. It's intense. It's really cool to be able to set up a tent, sleep in that tent, have a limited amount of things to basically get you through. So you've got to make sure that you use everything to the best of your ability as efficiently as possible. And then everything gets packed back up into the same little space of your backpack, and you trudge on. And then you stop and you set up somewhere else and you do the whole thing again, each time in a slightly different environment, different weather, different challenges, right? And it's an ongoing journey in that you really, really have to, day by day, let go of these little comforts. And what's funny is by the time you get back from one of these journeys, especially if it's an extended duration, let's say a couple of weeks, maybe a month, hiking a good long trail, you get back and you feel unstoppable and so grateful for everything. You're just like, oh my God, hot water that I didn't have to like boil in a pot over a fire. This is great. So it dawned on me that this would be a valuable experience again for me, as well as for Andrew. And so I'm going to throw this out there, Andrew. I don't know what you think about this, but how about when we reach, say, 1,000 Patreon subscribers, you and I take a month-long hike and just broadcast the whole thing, and we'll make some video. We'll even podcast while we're out there whenever we're in range, and we'll rough it. We'll just grab some tents and fucking do it up with some backpacks and disappear for a month.
I'm absolutely down. I think just even thinking about that, like I could see all of the benefits derived from it, and not even doing it for the benefits by any means, but just that experience in itself is, I think, similar to like my take on everyone should at least try mushrooms like once in their life. Everyone should probably do a situation like that at least once in their life, even from, limited egotistical, like this is going to give me benefit perspective, like just so you can come back to your life and all of those things that you thought were such a big deal. It's like relative to being able to go in the shower and turn it and hot water just appearing. It's like, that's a magical thing. That's magic right there, basically. And we get so caught in thinking that's just the way it is when it isn't, that bringing our attention back to that can be like incredibly beneficial. And this kind of ties into something I've been thinking about and just like wanted to bring up, just the experience of this being kind of dreamlike and how that shifts your perspective of everything. And you were saying with recognizing how little you need, how important it is to recognize that. And when you don't see, and so coming at this from the perspective of this being a dream, everything about the experience kind of shifts, the questions that you ask, the way you go about things, what you give your attention to or don't give your attention to, how much the additional stuff, the weights, the things that we own, you start to see more of as a weight, as like a hindrance to the extent of that experience. So if everyone were to recognize this, just I know dream is conceptual, just a word, whatever. But if everyone were to recognize that this is a dream, the questions of, why are we doing this? What am I doing this for? What am I trying to become? They almost go away in a sense. Like you're not becoming anything. Like when you're dreaming, there's not, where am I getting? What does this mean about me? It's just like, you're fucking dreaming. Just do stuff. Like just do things in it. And this is something, and I know Ray's kind of been in this quote unquote spot for a while. And this is just something that is hitting me more and more. And the more it hits me, the more I'm like, oh, this dualistic unity, everything that we're doing is exactly what I would want to do through recognizing this being a dream, as well as everything else that it informs in my life. And so with that, it's like I'm very much going through the process of like, oh, wow, this is that experience. And like getting used to it in a way, like getting used to being in that, because everything that we're brought up, everything that we grow up believing and thinking about is through the lens of this not being as dreamlike, through the lens of this being something that needs to be figured out, that needs to be, that I need to become something. That's where my values derived from accomplishing things and becoming something. But it's like the question of what is this all about? Why, as it becomes more recognized as a dream-like experience, it's like that. It's not that is the figuring out of it, but it's a shift in perspective that allows you to let go of the desire to figure it out and just be involved in the situation. Like when you're dreaming, there's nothing that could possibly be of higher priority than the experience that you're having. Like there is nothing pulling from that attentiveness. And so the more you recognize that, the more you let go of your conceptual ideas of what's happening, what should be happening, what you want to be happening, what someone else's fault is, what this is leading to. It just, things start to make more sense in that there's no way to, that there's nothing that makes it make sense in a way. Like you stop trying to make everything make sense and you just fucking pay attention to the experience that you're having. And you just get so involved in it that everything starts to be kind of fulfilling in itself. And so anyway, what you brought up with all the camping stuff like that in itself is just another way to be involved. And so all of the experiences just, and this has been hitting me for a while now, years now. It's just like every experience, it has potential to be fulfilling in and of itself. And yet we're kind of brought up with everything having an ulterior motive, everything doing this to get this, doing this to become this, doing this to let go of this. And it's like when you come back to that recognition of just how dreamlike this is, there isn't those ulterior motives anymore. And then everything just becomes full. And then everything is just like fucking, you're paying attention to it. You're involved in it. And that's what the closest thing I can come to what it's all about is just paying attention.
It really is that. That's funny. Like there's this funny parallel between not having to pay attention and having the space to get wrapped up in dramatic narratives and nonsense. Whereas if we were really busy, like if we were really focused on our reality out of necessity, we wouldn't have the time to think about that shit. So what I mean is that, let's say you're at home right now, you're dwelling on your life, you're thinking about how everybody hates you and that tomorrow's going to suck at work. And I don't know, you haven't had sex in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. You're just going through all the thoughts. And then suddenly the smoke alarm goes off. You are no longer thinking about any of that shit. And the entire process of you running around your house trying to figure out if something is on fire, right, feels fucking dreamlike. Why does it feel dreamlike? Because you're absolutely absorbed in it, right? This is why large catastrophic events, they go by in a dreamlike fashion. This is why, you know, after car accidents, it's or during a car accident, it feels like everything slows right the fuck down. You're paying attention, right? And that's why when you're camping, it becomes kind of dreamlike, because once you figure out survival, it's just going through that process. And then what's nice is you're left in this gap where you're just in nature. And because you've spent so much time just doing the shit that needs to be done without thinking about yourself, you develop the habit of not thinking about yourself. So now you're just sitting on this kind of half log with the fire that you built, you know, maybe a few splinters and, you know, some dirty hands, but you feel goddamn good, and you're hearing the nature around you, and there's nothing but the calm that's within you. It becomes kind of dreamlike. But how often do we pay that much attention to what we're doing day in, day out? I mean, more often than not, we're thinking about ourselves and our narrative, right? But I mean, that's the whole reason that life becomes dreamlike, is because you become fully involved with everything you're doing. And you know you're fully involved because it's got your full attention. You know, this is why I tend to stop and giggle at ridiculous things, is because I'm honestly just paying attention to those things enough to stop and honestly giggle and break whatever thought pattern I was going through at the time, break whatever intention I was going through at the time. This is why I'm such a slow walker. I hate the idea of walking with an intention to go somewhere. I really just like walking. You know, this is why I'm looking forward to Denver, where I can wander aimlessly with no idea where I'm going.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. Like I would, especially when I was living in New York, I would always just like head out for a walk. And it's funny when you talk to someone about that, they're like, well, where are you walking to? It's like, I'm just walking. Like, can it not be an experience in and of itself? And people won't even use it to get from A to B. Like people will, you know, like they think of it as this like arduous task to do it. And it's like anything that isn't the peak of the most convenient thing you could possibly do is seen as a difficulty or it's interesting. Because I would have, you know, sometimes I went to dinner sometimes with friends and it would be like 3 miles away, and I would just leave early and just walk there. And they'd be like, dude, you're fucking crazy. And it's like, what, a 3 mile walk? That's not even very much. And yeah, so, but yeah, with that, just being willing to do things for the sake of doing so is almost like a foreign concept to us. Like we've almost forgotten that is a possibility. And like, that's what it's all about. Like if you're not doing something for the sake of doing it, you're not going to be nearly as fully involved. And yet it is such a foreign concept because we're always trying to do something for our conceptual idea of ourselves. Like either do it to improve it and feel better about it, or do it so we don't feel worse about it. And in that spot, you're almost never doing something for the sake of doing it. So you're never fully attentive to it. Even if you feel like you are, depending on your intention, it's like feeling like you are is getting to 60-70% attention, because there's a part that's cut off from that just because of your reason for doing so, like your involvement in it. And I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to let go of by any means. I still do. I would say I still do most things with an ulterior motive, and there's still, but even just recognizing that and the kind of, quite frankly, the absurdity of doing things with an ulterior motive that seems, in a certain mentality, absurd to say that it's absurd that you would do things with an ulterior motive, you know, because that's all that we do. Like, what do you mean you're not doing it for something else? And the fact that we've gotten to a point where we think it's absurd to not do something for something else is just very indicative of where we're at, very indicative of how caught in believing the dream to be real and serious we've gotten is because we're living for things that aren't as real. That's interesting. Like the more real we believe this to be, like real in the sense of like serious and all of our conceptual ideas to be real, I guess that's it. The more we take those to be real, the less attention we pay, because we're paying attention to conceptual ideas. And even this, I say things like dream or real or not real, and those are all kind of irrelevant to just what it is. Like, it just is. You want to put any label on it, that's not going to adequately describe it. So I guess us believing this is quote unquote real versus dreamlike is just that we've created a conceptual idea of what this is, as opposed to not maintaining that conceptual idea. And so as that conceptual idea is built about the overarching, what this is, trying to conceptualize it, the attention is paid to the conceptual ideas that are involved in it. And so as our attention gets paid to that, it's not paid to what actually is and the experience that we're having, because we're just living in that conceptual world. And so as you begin to let go of how real you think those are, all of your priorities and attention just come back to the experience that you're having. And then everything that you do kind of stems from that. And so you incorporate, like degrees of ulterior motives, sort of, but they're never the priority. It's always the experience that you're having with like secondary, like you have an overarching idea of what's happening. Like with Dualistic Unity, there's like an overarching idea. The attention is always paid to the experience we're having. Like when we're on a live stream or group chat or whatever, like priority is the experience that we're having. But then there's, sometimes sort of background stuff, but we've gotten it so flipped where it's like the background stuff is the priority, and then paying attention to the experience we're having is secondary, which is fucking insane when you put it like that it would ever be flipped. But it has been. It very much has been.
Yeah, it makes sense though, because we're afraid. We're thinking about the one thing that we feel is going to be or have the biggest payoff, which is protecting ourselves, which is immediately the idea of ourselves. And so we become self-absorbed. And so now everything we do comes through the lens of competition. Right. And one of the things I really enjoyed about Hawkins and Power versus Force, the first book specifically, because he was talking about a lot of the background research that they had done, some of the things that they had noticed. He gives a lot of anecdotal evidence as well as some evidence from different points in history. But he talks about people who like Olympic gold medal winners, or people who have broke records that were set long ago and weren't broken after that. Often the experience that they communicate is that they are not doing it for themselves. Like when that Olympic gold medal runner is, suddenly gets that burst of speed, it's because there's this draw of total attention to what they're doing. They're lost in that sense of flow state. And often they communicate that it's because they're focused on doing it for some other thing than themselves, whether it's their country or their people or the love of the sport or whatever it might be. It's something other than them that's propelling them. And so right there, you kind of get this inkling like, oh, wow, this person ran really fast. And then they stopped thinking about themselves and they ran even faster. Like that kind of stuff really settles in. But how much of our life do we spend thinking about ourselves? When somebody comes up to us and they lose their temper because they're pissed off and they say something about us, maybe they say, fuck you, I hate your hair. Do you immediately think to yourself, oh, fuck, I've done the best I could on my hair. What, fuck, other people don't care about my hair. I like my hair. Fuck that person and their hair. Or do you think to yourself, oh, fuck, is this person okay? What do you go through first? Right. And that's going to tell you where your focus is. And I'm not saying that that's easy, nor am I saying that that's a transition you're going to make overnight by any means, but it's one choice at a time. It really is. Like when you're in that situation, you will feel the urge to defend the fiction of you. How committed are you to that fiction? That's really all it comes down to, because if you're not, then you're going to take that moment to go, I don't need to defend that. I don't need to think about that. And you're going to see the person in front of you almost like for the first fucking time. And it's just because you're not in the way. It's just because you've let go of this image that you had of them, which was based on your desire to think about yourself, because that's where the image comes from. As soon as you think about yourself, it creates a fucking image of the next person. Everything goes through that filter. Once you question that, the filter starts to go away, and all of a sudden you're talking to people. You're seeing people, you're recognizing that they're going through the same shit that you are, that they feel alone and insecure, that they're afraid, they don't know how to live, they don't know what this is about, they don't understand why we're here or where we go when we die or even what the fuck life is. They have the same goddamn questions that we do. And because they're afraid, they're trying to ignore those questions or pretend they know. And what you're watching is them dance around their insecurity and their fear. And you cannot see that as long as you're catering to yours.
Yeah, well said. It's funny. I was at karaoke the other night and had someone film me just for my little TikTok Instagram series. And it was interesting because there was this table in front who obviously didn't know that I was getting filmed. And they were like, it was so interesting because they were like making fun of me while I was singing. And it was so interesting to see that play out. And it was a table and a couple of them had gone up to sing. And so I was watching it. And of course, like a part of me was like, oh, I don't have to listen to that. But then another part of me was like, oh, I'm curious what they said. So I was like tuning in, and it was just like, it was so funny because it was all assumption, obviously. Like I'd never met them, never interacted with them, like didn't interact with them that night, but they were just like saying things like I was wearing a Sundance t-shirt, which is like a sort of resort thing in Utah. They have skiing and stuff. And it's, I think basically based on everything they said, they had this image of me of being like preppy white boy who thinks he's cool and like singing all these songs and just, because I was like up there laughing, having a good time. And they were like, it was so interesting to see like the judgment play out and see it from the perspective of like them seeing an image of me that isn't me, basically. Like they weren't seeing me at all, and they had never, and the fact that people can do that without interacting with someone and just make assumption after assumption after assumption after assumption. And it's like, it's so obvious that it's coming from so much insecurity on their part and a desire to see someone in a certain way, and that people will actually legitimately settle upon something and be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely correct about this, is so funny. And it was so, I was like laughing at it. At first, I'm not gonna lie, at first I was like kind of like, oh, I was kind of feeling bad. And then I was like, wait a second, this is crazy. Like I'm up there, definitely not the best singer in the room necessarily, but like, having a good time, like enjoying myself, just up there. I wasn't with anyone at the bar. I'd met some people that I was sitting at their table, hanging with them. And the fact that like people can make all of those assumptions and kind of like laugh at someone for doing something, especially at karaoke. Like I always, if someone's being judgmental at karaoke, like, you just want to put your arm around them and be like, hey, is everything okay? Like, are you doing all right? And it's absurd, but it was interesting and just how people just see everything through their perception of themselves, and depending on how they see themselves is going to be how they act in reality. Like the actions that they take are going to be dictated based on how they see themselves and what they see being missing. Like they try and gain that from the external. Like if they see a certain aspect of themselves not having certain degrees of value, like they're going to try and fill that by balancing things out in reality, like bring people to the spot that they feel like they're at, to try, because of that competition, kind of, as you were saying, and the drive to, I don't know, be on an equal playing field. And it's all based on their perception of themselves. Like it's all because they're thinking about themselves. If they, like just that table, like if they weren't there caught up in themselves, there wouldn't be any drive to laugh at someone or make fun of someone whatsoever. Like it wouldn't be there. And it's like it couldn't exist without being so involved in yourself. And so it's interesting to see that from the perspective of knowing without a shadow of a doubt that they're not seeing the reality of me. They're just seeing a mental image. But the other thing that you brought up with the running, even like that, and just that imagery and the analogy basically of the experience of reality, and when you're not thinking about yourself and just going through it, is like running, and how much you're attached to is like putting weights in your backpack as you're running. Like, it's going to slow you down, but as you drop them, you go faster and faster. As you're not thinking about yourself, you go faster and faster and faster. And it's like, eventually you get to a point, I'm not saying like literally running, but you get to a point where you're like running at the speed of light, and just everything is, and that's like that sort of flow state experience where you're not even there because you're not there. And like, that's where I took it. As you were saying that, I was like seeing it picking up, and I was like, wait, you keep going. Like, eventually you get to a spot where you're just like so interconnected and involved in the situation that you're experiencing, because you're not thinking about yourself, because that's the thing that takes us out of it. And so as we're running through reality, as we get caught on certain things, like we slow down, and that's the weight. And it's almost reflective of the experiences we have. Like, as we get involved in that, like, we feel more tired, we feel more sluggish, and that's us like being compressed, like weighed down by our perceptions, by our ideas, by the weight of ourself. And so as that's alleviated, we feel better. So therefore we can run faster, but we run faster, and therefore we feel better. And it's all just like, on either side, it's reinforcing itself. And it's all just how involved we are in the fiction of ourself versus the reality of ourself.
And you can feel the difference. It's so funny how the same action from a different intention has a totally different impact, but the action is the same. And what I mean is that at karaoke is a good example. You will have people who, like, when you're up singing and you try a song and you go for it on some note that you're not going to hit, but you're like, fuck it, because you're there and you're having a good time, and you crack it, your voice goes all weird as you're doing it, that kind of thing. And then, so you give a kind of a giggle, like that was fun. And people laugh along with you, as opposed to the, he tried and he failed, which is a totally different type of laughter. And it's coming from a different place, and it feels different. It's like I've said many times, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you. You're just choosing not to participate. Right? Like, you don't have to take yourself so seriously. You don't have to take yourself so seriously all the time, or at all. Really. You really don't. It doesn't do you any benefit whatsoever. Take things seriously, sure, not yourself. Right? Your responsibilities, sure, not your self-image. That really is the dividing line. And so I think that there's a lot of lessons in karaoke about life as a whole. I mean, life is karaoke. There is no difference whatsoever, except the fact that you're not given a microphone and some background music, but you are still up there doing the best you can. And the question is, are you afraid of how you're performing because how you think everybody else is perceiving you? Or are you just really in the fucking song? That's what life is. And if you treat it like that, then every opportunity is a chance for you to express yourself. It doesn't have to be singing. There are lots of different types of songs.
Well said. Yeah, I like that a lot. Life really is like karaoke. Like, it's so funny because, and you can feel it, like when you're up there concerned, there's like a hesitancy, and when you mess something up or don't hit a note how you want, there's like that concern. Whereas, yeah, for the most part, like I'll go for it. What I have noticed is there is for me like a sort of gap, and I think part of it is when you're doing karaoke. Like, I've always enjoyed karaoke, but because you're more involved, there's less at least for me, like attention on the notes. And it's also tougher because usually you want to sing louder in karaoke. And it's like when it's louder, you're not like when I've been doing the singing videos, it's very much at like a lower level, like focus on trying to be involved in the singing. Whereas karaoke, I'm like, oh, like me practicing this is gonna translate to karaoke. And like I'm sure it has to a point, but it's also the singing at karaoke is a louder experience. Like I've tried to kind of sing at that regular place, and it's just not the same. Like there's not the same energy to it. So eventually you're just like, fuck it. And you just go for it. And depending on your concern is going to dictate the experience, because it's not about doing it well. It's just about being involved in it. Because then, and the best thing about it is just being involved. Because if you're like, where is your focus? Is your focus on you? Because then your goal is going to be to sing the best that you can, or is your focus on all of you? Because then it's not going to be about you doing super, super well. It's going to be about the wholeness of the experience. And sometimes someone going up there and just giving it their all and not having the best voice, but having great energy and like kind of laughing when they mess up, like people get behind that, and then people will like sing along with you and help you out. But if you're up there like taking it very seriously and trying to do super well and just like taking every mess up seriously and like getting frustrated about it, like that's not going to be as enjoyable of an experience for anyone. And so it's not about doing really well. It's just about being involved in it and doing it for you, and not taking yourself seriously will allow people to recognize that they don't have to take themselves quite so seriously. And then it's like a back and forth that builds up everything when that's where your focus is, because there isn't that weight of your attention on yourself, like your weight on a fiction, as your attention is paid to things that aren't in reality. Essentially, that attention is taken from reality. Like we always have that 100% high of attention, essentially. And as we're focused on certain things that aren't reality here and now, it takes away from that potential attention that we can give. As we pay less attention to those, we have more ability to pay attention to where we're at, and our sensitivity increases, like everything about it, our experience increases, because there isn't the weight that's being taken from it with the concern about something that isn't as real as we believe it to be. And the perceptions of ourselves is never going to be the reality of what we are. And we make the assumption that everyone else has the same exact perception as we do of ourselves. Like we're always making that assumption, and it's never, ever correct. Not even a single person has the same perception of you as you have of yourself. And not a single person has the same perception of you as any other single person has of you. And so the more you recognize that, the more you're just like, well, fuck, I'm just going to keep stepping into it and keep finding out and keep being involved in the experience, because it's not necessarily about you doing the best. It's just about how much attention you can pay. And as you pay that attention, it's best for all of you.
Yeah, just jump in. Fuck. And there's going to be lots of people who tell you not to, or they'll laugh at you after the fact. Fuck. I remember I went to karaoke in this small town once, and the karaoke in this small town was all songs from like the 60s and the 70s and the 50s. They were really, really old tunes. And so I figured, fuck it. And I went up and I sang one, and it was, I don't remember what I sang, but I'm just fucking like, fuck it. And I'm like, I'm going to like belt it out, and my voice is cracking, but great at the beginning of the song, and towards the end, and it just kind of went to shit. But I had a great time. And so then afterwards I went outside for a smoke, and this guy comes out, fucking didn't even miss a moment, man. He's just like, oh yeah, you're trying to act like a big singer. And he was like getting all in my face, and he's like, oh, you're really fucked up at the end, and he's laughing at me, and I'm, oh yeah, for sure. And I'm just having a smoke with him. I'm like, yeah, you singing? No. All right, fair enough, right? And that's it. Like very often that's not the case, or they're going to go up and sing one of those safe songs, and they do so in the quietest voice that they can, right? Because they're trying to feel safe. But there's this fun balance at karaoke, and this is something that happens in life too, if you take it that way. You practice on your own, right? Like when you're spending time by yourself, whether you're singing, whether you're going through your doubts, whether you're, I don't know, exercising, it doesn't matter. It's your time. You're working on your own. You are the only influence in this case. Okay. When you're around other people, that's when it's not quite so controlled. It's not so comfortable, right? So look at it as the difference between singing at home alone or singing at karaoke. Singing at karaoke, there's more influences. There's more environment. The music's louder. You get a little bit more into it. You're like, fuck it, I'm gonna melt this out. And so you find this weird balance between going back and forth between skill and passion. Right? Because the passion is the one at karaoke when you're just like, and you get right into it and you're willing to have your voice crack and whatnot. And the skill is what you're practicing at home. Right. But it's finding that balance, So now when I go up and I sing at karaoke, or just in general, when I go up and sing at karaoke, I just go to sing because no matter what I'm singing, no matter whether I do well, quote unquote, or badly, quote unquote, I still just put some time into singing, which means that I've learned a bit about myself, whether it's, getting over my fear of judgment, getting over my fear of trying a song, or I've learned a little bit more about singing. Maybe I had an insight about breathing, breath control during singing, because that happens sometimes. You're just like, I'm going to try this differently. And you push from your stomach. You're like, oh, that works better. That kind of thing. That's the experience. But you only find that by jumping in, right? It's just, what do we mean by jumping in? Well, when you're alone, it's kind of a more quiet, controlled jumping in because you're just jumping into your own space, right? When you're jumping into reality around you, it's still your space, but there's more potential. There's more influence, right? So that's when, again, you're finding that balance. But we go because we lack the people who go to judge, or the people who go because, they want to feel better at the end of the day, and they can't just let go and sing, and so they need to feel better. Or they go and sing with the specific intention of making everybody else look worse. This is why that like they'll sing, they'll wait for people to applaud, and then they'll just sit quietly for the rest of the night and not applaud. That is something that often happens too. Whereas I love, you've seen me at karaoke. I'm that guy who's like running across the bar to go and tell that person, that was fucking awesome. You did great. Because I love that shit. I love boosting people up because the experience of just being courageous should be encouraged.
Oh yeah, I love hyping up, and when someone goes for it, just giving out a woo, one of those. But yeah, it's interesting the difference you bring up between being by yourself and being around a lot more of yourself, basically, because we maintain like there's a degree of comfort and then discomfort in the shift, but you can maintain, depending on your perspective, the same sort of experience, whether you perceive yourself to be alone or you perceive yourself to be with other people, because you're still alone in yourself, in your experience, no matter what. But it is almost like going from, really calm water when you're by yourself to really choppy water and really turbulent water. And so it's not to say that you can't find balance in it. It's not to say you can't float. It's not to say that you can still be equally as calm in the choppy waters, but it takes some getting used to. Like there's a lot more of you involved in it. And just because, and just because you've let go of your judgment of yourself when you're alone, because even people will be so self-critical, like they won't even sing when they're by themselves. And so you can let go of that, but then there's still, and then feel better and be willing to do it by yourself and even spend the time practicing. And this is just for singing, but this literally goes for anything in life. So then you step into a spot with other people. And so maybe you've let go of your judgment of yourself, but there's still a lot of people who haven't let go of their judgment of themselves. And because they haven't let go of their judgment of themselves, as they see you, that gets reflected onto you. And so that's like the turbulence of the waters. Yeah, maybe when you were alone, you had really turbulent waters, and then you've kind of worked through that, let go of your judgments of yourself, let go of your assumptions about where you think your value lies, and that water has calmed. And so you still have that, but the degree to which everyone else has let go of their need to judge themselves and criticize themselves will cause the water to be potentially a lot choppier or just a little bit choppier. And if you're stepping into a spot with a lot of people who are super fucking self-critical and judgmental, that water is going to be really choppy. And so it's going to be, there's going to be a experience where, you know, you're getting into it and you kind of have to find that balance. Like it's a different experience. You don't quite have the same proprioception going on in that water. And so it's not to say that you have to find a spot that's calmer, but if you're calm in yourself, you still can have that same degree of relaxation. And even in that, like, as because there's the concern about other people, that's almost you causing the water to be choppy. And it's really just your perception of their perception of you. So it's still you, which is funny. And so it's still you because there's no other people. And so it's still you kind of like quote unquote causing the water to be as choppy in that situation because, and you're like passing off the responsibility of the choppy water onto other people because you perceive them to be judgmental when they're just involved in themselves. And so they're not really seeing you, but you're giving attention to their perception of you, which means that you're seeing yourself in a given way. And so as you let go of that, that water can be equally as calm as the water when you're alone, because you're still alone. Just believe that your idea that you're not will cause those perceptions to be like overlaid by you and taken in as some degree of truth, which you don't have to do. And as you don't do that, that experience of being at karaoke can be exactly the same as your experience by yourself in the shower singing. It can have that same degree of calm. It really can.
Huh. It's just fluidity, right? That's all it is. It's just going through it without ever letting it land a blow on the fiction of you. That's what it is. It's quite literally just dancing through life, right? Which is what we do, which is why it's so important to express yourself, because that's where you start to actually feel the rhythm, right? That's where you can actually find the dance. But most of the time we're so goddamn clunky going through life because we're so afraid. So we're just like, you know, taking one very mechanistic step and then taking another very mechanistic step, making sure we're fucking grounded. Oh God, what's going to happen next? And we're very much robots in a symbolic kind of sense, in that we're very rigid and we lack sensitivity and we're completely logical and we don't tap into any degree of intuition and we don't have any sense of sensitivity to everything around us or connection whatsoever. And so, you know, we unfortunately, we live like that, which makes it very difficult for us to enjoy karaoke or anything else. And it's just because we're resisting it every step of the way, which is why the waves pummel us instead of reminding us how big we are as the ocean itself. Right? We're just resisting what we are. That's it. I want to remind everybody that if you would like to see this live and in person, we are going to be at a Denver bar on June 14th, not January, Jesus. We're going to be at a Denver bar on the night of Wednesday, June 14th for karaoke. You can join us. If you're in Denver or the Denver area, do keep an eye on Andrew's Instagram feed, because he will be posting stuff from that bar, because we're not going to tell you where it is quite yet. There are only so many karaoke bars on a Wednesday night in Denver. So if you wanted to do the research, you'd narrow it down to about a half dozen. So, but if you'd like to join us on Patreon after this call, we'll actually just tell you where it's going to be. And then we'll meet you there, because that's going to be a lot of fun. You can come and experience karaoke with us. If you're scared to sing, don't worry about it. You know, everybody's scared to sing. You can watch us go up and be scared to sing, to sing, and watch other people be scared to sing and do it anyway. And then if you're scared to sing and you want to push through that, that's fine. The whole trick is to not think that you don't have to be scared, right? Or that you're not going to be scared. That's life. You know, everything that you do that is change from what you're used to is going to seem scary and uncomfortable. Why? Because it's not what you're used to. That's really it. That's as complicated as it gets. If you want change in your life, buckle up, because this is going to get uncomfortable. But that's what you wanted, right? This is the thing. I was saying this the other day, that it's funny because we want change. We want change. We're asking for change in our life. We're asking, you know, Santa for a present. And then along comes an experience that's uncomfortable, that we don't like, that we prefer to avoid. And we try to get out of it, not realizing that's the fucking present, but it's in wrapping paper we don't recognize. That's the gift. But you got to go through it. The wrapping paper is the fear. The wrapping paper is the familiarity of what you're used to. The wrapping paper is your old life. Rip that fucker off and experience the gift that is this new version of yourself that is slightly more free. But you have to go through the uncomfortable wrapping paper to find the gift.
Well said. Yeah, it's funny because people will see someone do something and step outside their comfort zone and make the assumption that, oh, that must be easy for them. They must. And it's almost like an excuse we use when we see someone go into something new and try something new or an uncomfortable situation. They're like, oh, they must just be, not have any discomfort whatsoever. And like every time, no matter how many times you go, just sticking with karaoke, but this is applicable to anything, no matter how many times you do something like that, there's still like twangs of nerves. Especially, it's funny too, because like most of the time they're at a bar, and like a karaoke is at a bar, and so most people are drinking, and so we're able, there's that balance of like, the liquid courage and whatnot. And so I've been going, I've just been twice. It was last week, but this place near the Airbnb I'm in right now, this bar that has karaoke, and like I haven't drank while I'm there at all. And so it's funny because most of the time you do karaoke, especially at a bar, it's like you at least have like 2 or 3, which is, enough for some of those nerves or whatever. But I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna feel these. And so not only, and it's funny, like thinking back to 5 years ago, I don't think I would ever do something like this, but go to a bar by myself and just do karaoke and just sing and whatever, and not have any, like not even have a beer. I think the first night I think I had 1 beer. And then the other night I didn't have any, and I sang a few songs, and like I was nervous, and like I was nervous and not super comfortable going up every single time, but I still did it. And so there's a part of me that was like, there's always the part of me that's judgmental to a point that's like, oh, like, why are you even nervous about this? It's silly to be nervous about this. And then it's like, no, it's there's nothing wrong with that. Even just doing these things. And sometimes I can get caught in like taking, oh, I'm taking 1 step out of my comfort zone. Like, why can't I take 7 steps out of my comfort zone? It's like, I already went to a bar by myself. I'm already not drinking. I'm already going up and doing karaoke, singing some songs. Like one of the songs I did I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. This is a song I haven't listened to since I was like, 7. And so there's a whole chunk of the song that I was like, fuck, I don't even remember what the melody was for this. And so I was just like kind of getting through it, and I was kind of laughing as I was going through and just like whatever. And so yeah, it's easy to think that when people do things or go through things that they're just not feeling that discomfort anymore. And like that doesn't go away fully. And so we use that as an excuse, like, oh, someone else, they don't have the discomfort, that's why they're doing it. And so if I have the discomfort, then I can't do it. And that's the easiest cop out. It's just like, oh, if I have any discomfort, I'm not going to do it. It's like, that's never not going to be there, especially for big shifts and changes, doing something well outside your comfort zone, or even anything outside of your comfort zone. And the more you do it, the more that comfort zone expands. But every time you step outside of it, it's still going to be that discomfort. So it's almost like you got to let go of the idea that you shouldn't be uncomfortable. Like you have to understand that there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be nerves, there's going to be all of those things that come up whenever you step into a different experience. Like if it's something that you haven't been through, or even a similar experience, like to base your judgment of the situation or what you're going through on how comfortable or uncomfortable you feel, like is a terrible way of judging whether or not you should do something. Like letting go of that idea that you should have a certain amount of, or shouldn't have a certain amount of discomfort going into it, because you don't know what that is actually coming from necessarily. We like to settle upon the assumption that we know exactly where it's coming from. But a lot of times with those nerves or anxiety or concern, it's bringing our attention to the experience. Like it's just an energy that we're feeling. And because there's the twang of concern about what it means about us, we put all of that energy into that concern. It's like, oh, it's coming from this. It's like, no, it's just, you're stepping into uncharted territory. And so there's an energy that's built up from that as almost like a propeller. And then our concern about it is like, oh, this is a lot right now. It must mean this. It must mean I'm not where I should be. It must mean that I haven't made that much progress. It must mean this. It must mean that. And the progress is just looking at that and being like, yeah, all that's there. Fuck it. I'm gonna still step through it. And so it's not about not experiencing the discomfort. It's just about your perspective on it and just understanding that it means nothing about you. It means nothing about you. It means nothing about your progress. And you can feel all of that discomfort and still step into it and still, do a great job. And if you don't feel like you did a great job, you can let go of that. And that's an opportunity to let go of your judgments. And it's all just opportunities to have subtle shifts in your perspective and, how you view yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's the opportunity to let go of your attachment to the view of yourself as truth, right? And so this applies to a question that we have, and this is really important because so when we talk about everybody being you, immediately the assumption is, well, that's pretty egotistical. That's raising your own value, as it were. I'm trying to find the comment. Just give me a second. Okay, very unusual to assume that others are you. Actually, very inflationary, in my opinion. You're getting caught up in your idea of yourself rather than the reality of yourself is the easiest way that I can explain that. And what I mean is that when you're like, everybody's me, what do you mean by me? Do you mean the immediate image of yourself that you have as a human being with the body separate from everything else? Because that's not the reality, right? That's just the image of yourself that you've gotten accustomed to and identify with. And so you defend that stance as such. But any cell in your body could say, I'm me. Doesn't make it separate from the rest of the body, nor do you walk around saying, hi, I'm a collection of several billion cells. We all say hi, we'd like some dinner, please. You don't say that, you say I, because it's all the same I. In the same way that each cell is the same I, we are all the same I. It's our collective commitment or individual commitment, let's just say, to the perspective of individuality, which is our self-image. That creates this illusion of division. And so when you question who you think you are far enough and you end up with just the experience of what you are, there is no division. It is just the experience of you. And everybody else in the room who is experiencing you is also experiencing just themselves. And you are a part of their aware experience. But there is no division. In the same way, there is no division between this I and this I. They are experiencing slightly different perspectives, and they could say, well, I'm unique and I'm individual, but they're both part of the same awareness, experiencing those different perspectives. So beware the automatic urge to think that the simple statement that we are all you is an egotistical one. It's what remains when you let go of your concept of you. It's what remains when you come down to the reality of what you've always been, which is what is. Now you're saying that, well, my ego is the now. The now always exists, right? Your ego is this experience of the now, absolutely, but there are infinite experiences of the now. And you could say, well, only the ones that I'm experiencing in my lifetime. What about when you dream? What about when you imagine? What if you took more time to get into your dreams or your imagination? How real would they become? Have you ever done a sensory deprivation tank, for example? Are you so sure that you're limited to the experiences of the now that you identify with as having? Are you sure that's the length and breadth of everything that you're aware of? Or is it just that you're afraid to look further? And that's it. And as long as you're holding on to an idea of you and protecting that and worried about your ego and all that, it's going to be very, very difficult to let go. So as somebody else said in the comment section, I highly encourage you to check out season 1. I know you said you've listened to some of it, but I would encourage you to go back because there's more to it. All of season 1 and season 2 is about this, because it's very easy to mistranslate everyone being you as everybody being what you think you are.
Yeah. The concern with the statement, or your concern in the statement, whoever commented that to assume that everyone is you is inflationary. it's only because you're assuming something about yourself, like that concern about the assumption, because it's not an assumption, but you perceiving yourself in a certain way and believing yourself to be a certain thing is rooted in an assumption of what you think you are. And there was a follow-up. What I'm saying is that your ego, that experiencing the all I is still limited, and no human ego can experiencing that total objective is. And again, just assumption, as Ray said at the end there, like that's just based on your limited perception of what you think you are. And it's just a perception. And so it's not about believing that you're everything, because that's going to stem from like where me, your idea of me or I stems from, is going to dictate everything that comes after that. So that's why we push people like, don't believe in unity. Do not believe that this is all you, because if you're believing it and you're rooted in an idea of yourself, that belief is going to stem from that. And so you're going to see everything based on that veil of your assumptions about yourself. And so it's just what's left. It's not an active belief. It's a recognizing that you're making a lot of assumptions. You're actively making a lot of assumptions about yourself. It's about recognizing those and recognizing that, oh, those are all just assumptions. Those aren't the reality of me. None of my assumptions of what I think I am, of where I think my value lies, of my judgments of my progress are the reality of what I am. And through that, you'll see that your assumptions about yourself are equivalently not as true as your assumptions about everything else. And in that is in that uncertainty is what's left. And so, yeah, it's certainly not about believing any of it. It's that you're already believing a lot of things. You're already making a lot of false assumptions about what you think you are that aren't actually you. That's causing you to think that what we're saying, to distort everything that we're saying, because you're perceiving us to be saying it from how you perceive us, and assuming that we're perceiving ourselves in the same way as you perceive us from a divided, limited perspective. And it's not to say that's why the podcast is called Dualistic Unity, because it's not to say that there isn't the experience of division. There isn't the experience of the perception of division, but it in no way means it's the reality. And it's still the limitations, and even the idea of being human is still rooted in an assumption. Like it's still an assumption. And I know that one's uncomfortable. And that's something that we haven't really dug into, is that recognition that being human is still just an assumption, because there isn't anything inherently saying that you are. It's just our assumption of what we think we are, and the limited perspective of ourself and all of that. And, you know, if when I say things like that, people have usually a visceral response, and it's like, yeah, because it makes people very, very uncomfortable to look at that and recognize, oh, I can't necessarily settle on that. So instead of looking at it and being like, can I absolutely confirm that? It's like, oh, dude, that's crazy. Like, how many drugs have you done? You don't think you're human? It's like, you're settling upon assumption that you think you are. And there's a lot of things reinforcing that, but it's still assumption. It's still assumption. And so all we're recognizing is that those assumptions are never going to be the truth. And there is things to be recognized beyond those limited ideas of what you think you are. Like there is more to look into, and you're just settling because it makes you uncomfortable.
I would encourage you, again, season 1, season 2. There's also an episode in season 4 called The Habit of Being Human. I would absolutely recommend checking that one out, because identifying as the human that you are attached to identifying with is as absurd as identifying with the character that you dreamt you were last night. Because there's so much more that is within the potential of your consciousness. But when you were dreaming last night, you probably weren't always dreaming about being the person that you identify with. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. Maybe you were having a dream and not identifying whatsoever, but that experience still existed, right? And so all of the potential experiences that are available to awareness exist. But all of that potential, all at once, simultaneously in the here and now, right, is the all of everything. We have the experience of division. That's the beautiful part about this. It's like, out of all of that potential, there are certain little pockets where we're like, I'm experiencing this and this and this and this and this, infinite such experiences, in fact. But they're all you, not you, the you that you think you are, but the you that you actually are, the awareness that you are, which is the awareness of reality. It's not the awareness of your body. Your awareness isn't created by your brain, right? But you have all of this story that you identify with, that you are a human being made of meat. Your mind is inside that meat puppet, and you are disconnected from everything around you, except philosophically or maybe conceptually. Oh, we're all one, so on and so forth. But as long as you're thinking about your idea of you as truth, you'll never actually experience that. It'll always just be a conceptual plaything. And that's where the whole faith and humility thing comes in mind. Comes into play, because you can't simply try and rationalize your way to this. You actually have the courage. You have to have the courage to let go of who you think you are. And that is why clarity is on the very edge of sanity. You have to question everything, all of it. And until then you're just saying no, because I can't experience everything now. Okay, but you are everything now. You've always been everything now. Everything that is now, and you're now. You're the all of everything that is now. You're all you ever will know. Same is true for me. Same is true for Andrew, because we're all the same thing. All that will ever be known.
Exactly. There's another question here I wanted to address. Assumption is based on past experience. Our experience gives us the basis of how to handle future experiences. Knowing your assumptions are false requires you to ignore every experience you've had. How is that even possible? So I would argue that it's not your past experiences that inform future experiences. Those actually take away from the attention that you pay to the experience here and now. Like the change, everything that happens is always your experience here now. So as you rely upon past experiences to inform future experiences, you're missing the spot that all of it is actually informed by. Like all of your past experiences happened now. They all happened here and now, every single one. And so you keep relying upon that, keeps causing you to miss the experience that you're having here now, which all of the attention being involved in the experience that you're having informs everything. Because there is, and I know it's like, the cliche spirituality stuff, but it's like, there is no past, there is no future. Like there isn't. Your experience, the entirety of your life and reality is here now. You've never experienced the past. You're never going to experience the future. When the future happens, it's happening now. And so the degree to which you're paying attention to that will inform everything. If you're focused on what has happened, what might happen, your idea of what has happened, which isn't what actually happened. Like we very quickly distort our past experiences based on how comfortable or uncomfortable they make us, how much certainty we can derive from it. We make an assumption based on a past experience that this went this way, it meant this, these people thought this. It's all assumption. It's not the reality of the experience that actually happened. And so that's being veiled by all of the other assumptions that we're making. And then that creates a fear of what may happen in the future based on all the fucking assumptions that we made on the past. And so the whole time we're going back and forth and we're like watching everything and missing everything. And so it's not about utilizing the past at all to inform the future. It's about recognizing that how much that distorts the experience that you're having now and takes away from what actually informs every step that you take moving forward, which is the attention that you're paying on this step. And the example I like to use is, I've never really used it in this way, but like walking down a path, if you're focused on everywhere that you've been on the path, you're not going to be able to even have any degree of sensitivity to what's coming next. It's like that statement that you just made in the comment section is like walking backwards on a path, thinking that is going to help you moving forward. Like, no, you got to turn around. You got to be sensitive to the experience that you're having. If you think that the past informs the future, it's straight up like walking backwards on a path. And then you're like afraid. It's like, fucker, turn around. Like pay attention to where you're at. And then at the same point, if you're overly focused on the future, it's like looking down the path 100 yards as opposed to being sensitive. And it's like, there's potholes, there's curbs, there's rocks, there's all this stuff. And so you're stumbling. You're like, why is this happening? I'm utilizing the past to inform me. It's like, well, you're walking backwards, but I'm focused on where I'm going. It's like, yeah, you're focused on 100 yards down. You're not paying attention to the experience that you're having. Like you're only ever going to be in the spot on the path that you're in. When you get to that spot 100 yards down, you're going to be in that spot that you're in. You're going to be here now. And so it's just about the sensitivity you can pay to the experience here now. And you may realize like, oh, this is actually a very pretty path. There's some things to appreciate. Sometimes it gets a little bit uncomfortable, but if I'm paying attention to where I'm at, I can handle the discomfort. I can deal with the situations that arise. I'm not avoiding it. Something uncomfortable comes up, say you're on this path and like a wild animal comes up and you get overly concerned and it's like you're not even paying attention to it because you're concerned about where it's going to lead to. But as that situation comes up, like your attention comes back to the experience that you're having. You're not reaching back into, well, what have I done? Or what is this going to mean? You're focused in on that wild animal and dealing with that situation. And that's where life happens. And so we get overly caught up because we think, something that's happening now means something about this conceptual idea that only is rooted in all of those experiences and from looking back on those experiences. Like as you're paying attention to the experience, as you're involved in the walk along the path, like that idea of yourself doesn't need to be so involved. You don't need to maintain it. You can live your life for each single step that you take because you don't know, I'm talking about the path as if it is this linear thing, but each and every moment you're stepping into is at the end of the path. You're quote unquote making the path as you go. So it's not that there's even a path that is set in the future. Like you're always at the end of the path, being the path as it's created. And so as you look down that road, it's like you're honing in on one potential path out of infinite paths. And it's like being in a wide open field, just kind of wandering and thinking that there's a point that's definitely going to happen or that should happen. And so you conceptually create a path there. And then as you focus on that point, you miss out on the experience that you're having. So it's not about utilizing the past to inform the future. It's about being attentive to where you're at, because that is where all of the informing and information always comes from.
Well said. Absolutely. And just to follow up quickly, it's not about ignoring the past. It's about accepting that what happened in the past isn't what's happening now, right? Because that's the big danger, is the assumption that things that have come before are going to be the things that come after. Because that's when you get blindsided. That's when you start forming expectations and frustration. That's when you start feeling like you've been set back because all of a sudden you're in conflict with everything that's happening. And so, even with things that have happened previously, it's important to question your assumptions about those experiences. Your memories of things that you've gone through will change over time. You will get different lessons out of those things. You will start to question the perception that you had of those memories, even to begin with, because it came from a certain mentality. Right? So it's always about remaining in the present and understanding all possible moments that contribute to the experience that you're having right now. Being aware, just expanding. That's all it is, but that takes faith, right? And some courage and some practice. And that's pretty much it. Keep it light, pay attention, relax, be yourself, that kind of thing. We are going to end this here because we have 1 minute left. If you would like to join us, we have a tier 1 call directly after this. You can join us at patreon.com/dualistic unity. There is a free trial available now, which means that you can join us up to 5 days a week. We do these group Zooms with our community from Sunday to Thursday. They are the highlight of everything that Dualistic Unity does. It's a conversation like this. So of course, it's always interesting, but it involves a lot of other variations of you. Not the idea of you, the reality of you, because you are fucking massive. Andrew, as always, man, this has been a blast.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Appreciate the questions. And yeah, we'll see some of you on Patreon in 15 minutes. And if you're not on there, hop on that free trial, totally free trial for 7 days. It is well worth it. And I think you'll really enjoy the conversations. So